Everyone have their microphones on?
Test? I think you have to push.
That one. Testing. Okay.
Test 1, 2.
Hi, how are you? I'm Kristen. How are you? What's your name? James. I'm Kristen. Nice to meet you. Kristen Lawrence? Okay. All right, we can go on the record now. Good afternoon. We're on the record in case number 9791. Okay, sorry. We're on the record in case number 9791, investigation into gas inspection issues raised regarding Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Start with appearances. We'll go left to right.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Joel Michelle on behalf of BGE.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Daniel Hurston on behalf of BGE, and we also have with us Danielle Bradshaw Lee, who's the Director of Regional Gas Operations for BGE.
Can you
She's sitting
spell
right
the
behind me.
last name?
Yes, it's D-A-N-I-E-L-L-E, Bradshaw, B-R-A-D-S-H-A-W, a hyphen, and then Lee, L-E-E.
And the title again?
Director of Regional Gas Operations.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Ryan Hsu on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel. Also with me is Pauline Rices.
Other counsel for OPC have entered their appearance, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is it Mark Seibest?
Yeah, Mark Shebist.
Shebist.
Apologies, I'm
I have Michael Sammartino.
Michael Sammartino and
I have Ms. Races and
Nicole Zeichner. Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. David Banya on behalf of the former BGE employees.
Good afternoon. And staff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. We've also entered the appearance, I believe, of Michael Dean in this proceeding. And I have with me, as Your Honor requested, John Clemenson of the Commission's Engineering Division to answer questions from you.
Okay. I saw a certificate of compliance was filed, Mr. Michelle? Or Mr. Hurston?
Yes, Your Honor. We filed that yesterday, a certificate of publication providing proof of publication in the Baltimore Sun last Friday, as well as postings on BGE's website and our social media platforms.
Did you want that marked as an exhibit?
Sure. That could be BGE Exhibit 1.
Has everyone looked at it? Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
No objections.
Okay, BGE Exhibit 1 will come into the record. I believe the first issue that I would like to deal with is the confidentiality issue. Based on BGE's response to Bench Data Request 1-1, the only items that are confidential are employee names, salaries, and personal information. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. In the spirit of transparency, we want to be able to de-designate as much as possible, but looking through the materials, there still appears to be a couple pieces of information that we would still request be treated confidentially. Your Honor listed, I think, all of them: employee names, personally identifiable information. I think there's some employee ID numbers in there. There's some salary information. There were some home addresses, I think, in some of those. But we would like to be able to work with the parties to de-designate and make sure everybody's comfortable with what we have. As we did put in the bench data request, though, I wanted to be clear that we're not waiving our right to object to the relevancy or admissibility of confidential information or de-designated information, if the circumstances and the situation warrant an objection from BGE. But with that in mind, yeah, we would like to be able to work with the parties to de-designate. But I did have a question for Your Honor. The Commission's order initiating the proceeding talked about the staff's investigation report, but it also talked about the BGE response to the former employee's petition to intervene in the rate case. And my understanding is that was not designated confidential. We filed that publicly. So all I can think is maybe they were thinking about the BG response to OPC's motion to suspend the procedural schedule.
That's what I thought they were referring to, which was still, last time I checked, marked confidential.
Yes, that was filed fully confidential, but the other document, I don't think we designated that as confidential.
Okay, but why would the opposition to Office of People's Counsel motion to suspend procedural schedule still be entirely confidential?
No, we would be able to
Okay,
go through that and de-designate, subject to the exceptions I mentioned earlier.
that's my interpretation of the order, was to deal with that, the remaining item with a
And-
blanket confidentiality.
Your Honor, I would like to request that BGE go through the Staff Engineering Division investigation report that we filed on April 11th.
Yes, hang on just a second. So names and salaries, but what about salaries tied to names? In other words, can we have salaries if the names aren't tied to them?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. We're just concerned about particular employees and their salaries.
Okay, and you're never going to have an issue with locations of pipes or other infrastructure? Needing to
As
be
I sit here
confidential.
right now, I don't envision critical energy infrastructure information coming up, but I couldn't say for certain because, for example, some of the audit reports or inspections may have schematics or diagrams that have some of that. But, you know, my thought, Your Honor, is that we can deal with that, you know, as we have to, and, you know, subject to any directives you want to issue this afternoon. I think that we should be able to work with the parties to be able to get to a point of agreement on confidentiality.
Okay, I just wanted to highlight that there's another potential issue of confidentiality that wasn't mentioned
Well, thank
and
you.
might come up.
Yes, I think
What I would like
agree.
to do is have a key. So what would be filed confidentially is a key that says Inspector 1 equals this name, Supervisor A equals this name. That would be filed confidentially, and then the document itself could then refer to Inspector 1, Supervisor A, and be filed publicly.
All right.
Then my next item was confidential attachments to staff's report. BG's response to PSC ED SIR 2501 was marked confidential. BGE, I think, should be able to resubmit it with redactions. I think that's what Mr. Spivak was getting
Yeah,
at.
actually, Mr. Spivak was one step ahead of me. I was going to suggest that we could go back, look at the public version of the report as well as the attachments, and go ahead and de-designate pursuant to what we're talking about today.
Right, and actually I was going to ask that you also look at the confidential version of the report and basically send back to us a version that marks the things that you want to de-designate, and we'll go through it then and file a revised public version.
Yeah, we have no objection to that.
Why was staff's, the last part, attachment 3, questions and meeting notes, why was that given a blanket confidentiality designation?
It was, from our perspective, it was because they marked it as such. So,
Okay, it was staff's notes.
yeah, but the information in it, we weren't sure
Okay,
about
so
at
you-
the time.
BG is going to resubmit what it can resubmit, and then you're going to resubmit the questions and meeting notes as well.
Right, we'll resubmit the entire report and the attachments depending on what's de-designated.
Okay, and BG's March 31, 2025 letter, my interpretation was that it corrected some of your responses. So when BG resubmits, you can incorporate those so we don't have an extra document out there. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, that's the letter that I signed on March 31st.
Yeah.
So, Your Honor, you're saying your preference would be that we would just de-designate.
Well, those seem to be corrections to your responses, right? Clarifications, modifications?
Clarifications, or I think we were also responding to, hey, do you have any other information you want to provide to us?
Okay, but can't that be incorporated into your responses? I'm
Sure,
not interested in
it-
having a
it's-
separate piece of
It
paper
could,
out
I
there.
understand, but I don't want to pretend to answer for staff. I guess that's what I'm concerned about. We can certainly put this information into their
Well, it's
notes.
in your what you're resubmitting.
Okay, that may be the case.
Because you're resubmitting the confidential attachments to staff's report.
Yes, once we've had a chance to go through and de-designate.
Right. So my thought was the items in your letter would somehow just be appended to that,
Okay,
as opposed to a separate document.
all right. I understand what Your Honor is asking for. We will endeavor to try to minimize paper and de-designate accordingly.
Excellent. And to the extent it's not clear, we have a video of this and a transcript coming. Did the parties confer regarding a procedural schedule?
We have not conferred regarding a procedural schedule because I'll just speak for BG and me personally, I'm not really sure what Your Honor has in mind for this proceeding other than the date that the commission gave to deliver an initial report on August 6th.
Okay,
I didn't
I'll-
want to presume that we were going to do or not do something.
that's fine. I'll let you know what I have in mind.
All right?
So the staff's revised recommendation was immediate issuance of a commission order directing BGE to produce a list of all projects that were assigned to but not inspected by the discredited employee that were inspected by other inspectors from the Corrosion Leak Proactive Service Renewal Program for 2022 until his termination. Has BGE produced that list? No.
I don't think that's what they're asking about. They're asking about.
Staff revised its
Yeah, the
recommendation.
revised recommendation. Your Honor, I don't think we've provided that yet, or I'll have to check.
Mr. Spivak, do you know if BGE has provided your revised
Not
recommendation
to my
request?
knowledge, Your Honor.
Okay, that would be item number 1. You don't have to take copious notes. I'm going to put this in an order. So the commission directed the engineering division to ascertain whether the safety of the natural gas infrastructure was compromised. And at page 15 of staff's report, staff indicates the engineering division cannot, at this time, independently verify whether the physical integrity of the gas infrastructure was definitively compromised. So staff was unable to verify whether the safety of the natural gas infrastructure was compromised. So that is the focus of the first stage of this proceeding. Has staff recommenced discovery?
Yes, we have started discovery again, but there will be more of it.
Okay, the commission set out specific areas of inquiry in order number 91643. Staff was directed to get answers to at least 4 questions. Number 1, in consideration of the inspector's job duties and operator qualifications, why does BGE maintain that the field audits are part of the contractual oversight function and that the PSCED's attempt to equate these audits to comprehensive safety inspections is improper and without basis? I understand that BGE's position is that the work of the discredited employee was contract compliance, such as making sure that there were flaggers on site, making sure that crews are operating within the confines of their permit, making sure that the contractors are there where they're supposed to be there, and making sure that contractors also have the proper protective gear so that they are not injured doing the work. That's a quote from Mr. Ralph at the status conference. I view a lot of the statements that BGE has made as proffers, and BGE did not provide documentation to support these proffers as of date. Examples of what the discredited employee was responsible for were given, but in this instance, examples are not sufficient. Commission needs to see all the things that this type of inspector was responsible for. BG has stated that this type of inspector, their primary responsibility was to provide oversight on the day-to-day activities of gas construction and maintenance contractor crews to ensure workmanship and safety meets applicable BGE and jurisdictional standards. Did BGE provide documentation of applicable BGE standards?
It's my understanding we did provide some information to staff related to that because we believe strongly that this case needs to focus on what, if any, rules, regulations, laws, standards were violated, if any.
Mr. Spivak, did BGE provide applicable BGE standard documentation?
I am being told no by staff's witness.
Did BGE provide documentation of applicable jurisdictional standards?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, those will be items that I'll list in the order. In response to staff's information request, BG provided that in 2022, the discredited employees documented inspections through Locus View, the inspection tracking tool, were significantly lower than his peers. was the only way that BGE was checking on the work of its inspectors, such as the discredited employee, through the number of inspections documented? If you can't answer that at this time, or the answer is no, I would like to know if there was ever documentation produced of other supervisory methods.
All right.
Locus view is the tracking mechanism for it, the primary mechanism for it, and then ledger sign-offs. They have to, the contractors also submit their invoices. Those are then validated by BGE inspectors to the work that was done. I don't know if that's sufficient for what.
I guess what my question is getting at is, it seems that BG might have wanted to know more about how many inspections it could expect out of an inspector other than comparison to other inspectors. So I think there's some questions there. Primarily what the commission needs to verify is whether there are safety implications to the system, the lack of inspections or inaccurate inspections. In response, SIR 2501-2, BG stated that it did not find that the discredited employee submitted false inspection reports in 2023. And in its response to staff's report, BG stated that it identified a single instance in 2024 where the former employee submitted a falsified post-audit report. In this singular 2024 incident, the former employee submitted a post-audit report purporting to have conducted an audit of a contractor's work. No reinspection was required or could have even occurred in that singular instance because, in actuality, the contractor conducting the specified work had not yet commenced the work in question. And I believe that's how BGE learned that the report was false. I think somewhere else, BGE stated that it confirmed with the contractor that the job was not performed until April 18 of 2024, but yet the report was entered into Locus View on April 16, 2024. Does that sound correct?
Sounds accurate.
Okay, so it would seem as though BG learned that the false report was false because of the date and that work wasn't performed on the date it was submitted. Correct?
Well, subject to check our verification process, but I'm sure that's one of the reasons why we knew.
Okay, because it leaves open a question of whether BGE is confident there's only one false report, but the false report that was caught was because of the date issue. I don't know how BGE would know there's not other false reports if they were submitted on a date where the inspector was actually there and that date the contractor was actually there, but the observations themselves were false. I don't know how BGE would know. And so the commission needs to know how BGE would know the observations were accurate to make sure that all of the reports are not inaccurate.
Well, we can certainly check that, Your Honor. I think one way we would know is if the work actually gets done. I mean, the fact that it gets done is proof that the contractor was there, the job was being performed. But I hear what Your Honor's asking, and we can certainly look into any requests that are made by Your Honor or staff in terms of additional records or documents we may have.
Okay. I understand that you use this locus view and that there are 559 observations available in locus view for each field audit. Did
Sounds
staff obtain a listing of all 559? Mr. Clemenson, why don't you come up to the table? Can you pull up a chair? Was staff given a list of all 559 available observations?
A generic list, no.
So is BGE claiming that the observations are of a type that if there's going to be a safety-related incident as a result of there being a failure to, let's say, have flaggers on site or making sure that the contractors also have proper protective gear on so they're not injured at work, BGE would already know, right, whether there's been an accident or an injury on the site in 2022 or 2023 or 2024?
Check with my client. Does that sound right? Yeah. Yes, I'm being told yes.
I'm not sure we've answered the right question. Were there any accidents or injuries on job sites inspected by the Corrosion Leak and Proactive Service Renewal Program during 2022, 2023, or 2024?
I have to confirm that if there were any on there. Do you want specific to this inspector's job sites, or any in general for those three programs?
I want for the Corrosion Leak and Proactive Service Renewal Program, any accidents or injuries on job sites in those 3 years. Because I believe what BG is saying is that that inspector was, do you want to take a minute to confer with your
Yes, sir.
co-counsel?
Your Honor, the question is Your Honor looking for records pertaining to this particular inspector at issue in the PSC
No,
ED's investigation report?
no, because I don't believe he inspected as many jobs as he was supposed to. So what I'd like to first get an idea of, if BG's position is that these type of inspectors were there to make sure that accidents or injuries didn't occur on the site, then was that really done? Or were there accidents or injuries on site that this corrosion leak and proactive service renewal program didn't prevent?
Okay, we'll have to look into that. I just want to be clear, Your Honor, that we gave staff everything that staff asked for as part of their investigation. So I realize Your Honor has a lot of questions about, did staff receive this or did staff receive that? I just want to be clear, we gave them everything that they asked for.
I understand,
Okay.
but my understanding or my interpretation of what occurred is that in the time allotted to the parties, staff asked questions, BG provided information, you and the staff met, and the extensive documentation that I'm requesting now was not provided in that time period. And so staff came to the conclusion that they couldn't confirm that there wasn't an issue.
That's their conclusion in the report, but our concern with that report, as we set forth in our response, is that we can't read minds. They have to ask us what they want to see in order to conduct their investigation. They did that. We provided everything that they asked for. So
Well-
when we saw the recommendations that BG hasn't provided adequate documentation to support this, or BG hasn't proven that, that was a little surprising to us because we thought we were being fully transparent and cooperative.
Well, we're going to work past that, and we're going to
Understood.
get the documentation there now, because the way I read BG's response to staff's report is a lot of representations and proffers, as I said, that need documentation to support them. And it
the
wasn't provided to date.
Understood. To the extent there is documentation to support, we will certainly endeavor to find out.
I hope there's documentation to support the proffers that have been made.
Understood.
And at some point, I presume, sorry, Your Honor, I was just going to say, at some point, I presume that if all of this documentation is provided, it will, to the extent necessary, go into an evidentiary record.
Well, we're going to get there.
Okay.
Okay. According to staff's report, if an inspector found a safety issue or if something was not correct with a job, he or she could either issue an unsat for an issue that was immediately fixable. If it was a serious offense, the inspector would issue a stop work action. So I'd like to know what the serious offenses for which an inspector could issue a stop work action. Staff question 7 asked for sample reports completed by other BG inspectors for the same type of work, and I saw reference to a confidential SIR 2501-7 attachment 1, but I couldn't find it in the docket. Is that something that can be redacted and circulated?
2501, Your Honor.
2501-7, attachment 1. Supposed to be sample reports completed by other BG inspectors.
Just a minute, Your Honor.
Sure.
All right, so as maybe Your Honor is reading this too, I'm reading confidential attachment 1 to staff's report, And it is saying in response, please see confidential SIR 2501-7 attachment 1. So my understanding is we would have attached that to the response we gave staff. But if Your Honor's saying she can't see that, or that's if staff's claiming we didn't actually
No,
provide
I
that.
didn't say staff is claiming anything. I don't see it. So when you resubmit and redact, just to the extent that can be done with attachments as well.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, and then in response to staff's question 5, BG talked about there is an entirely separate process through which both company crews and contractors certify that jobs were completed by qualified personnel, among other things, on what is called the Inspection Repair Report, or IRR. Every IRR is reviewed by BGE personnel to ensure completeness before the work performed is placed into service in the company's system of records. Did BGE produce any IRRs to staff?
I don't believe we did, but I can make that subject to check. And again, I don't know if we were asked for that.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask for them now. BG seems to be indicating that another type of inspection is ensuring that operator qualifications are met.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Mr.
Okay.
Michelle was just pointing out, are we limiting this to the period in time, the 2022 to 24? Because if
Yes.
we're going beyond that, that's going to be a huge lift for
No.
us.
2022, 2024.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So there's another type of inspection is ensuring that operator qualifications are met. Response to question 10, BGE's project management team or the workload management team check to ensure that the contracting company has the proper qualifications to perform the tasks for the specific projects before it is assigned to one of the BGE's contractors. I think the sentence means that before BGE assigns work to a contractor, they make sure that that contractor can handle the work that it's going to assign to it.
I'm sorry, which question are you referring to, Your Honor?
I believe this was in response to question 10.
I don't have a question. Ours goes up through 8.
Oh, this might be staff's notes. Hang on a second.
Yeah, I believe it's in staff's notes.
Yeah, it's attachment 3 to staff's report, which is
Attachment 3, okay.
questions and meeting notes, March
Okay,
14 and
okay,
20.
I see it, yes.
That question, Chen,
Got it.
10, I apologize.
I'm sorry, what was the question? Did we provide that?
No, I wanted to clarify that I think this sentence in there means that before BGE assigns work to one of its contractors, the project management team or workload management team checks to ensure that the contractor has the proper qualifications to perform the tasks. That's what that sentence.
Yes.
And the BG's workload management team performs the post-work audits to ensure that all the required documentation is turned in and fully completed. I guess I still have a basic question, even after reading all of this. So BG's position is that this type of inspector was doing spot checks and really looking to see contract compliance items and safety on site items. So if the subject employee was responsible for such limited inspections as claimed by BG&E, it would seem to me that someone is actually inspecting the work before it's placed into service. So I have questions.
Contractors inspect the work before and subject to oversight by BGE personnel.
Okay, I guess I would like to see documentation of what is needed to place the work into service, what documentation exists. And I guess that leads right into the Commission's second question, which was what insights can BGE provide to explain the differences in job duties of a field inspector referenced in case number 9653 versus those in case number 9645? I don't know if you have BG's response handy, but from BG's response to Staff Engineering Division's report on probable cause in that case, BGE stated, specific to joint trench installations, field inspectors are on site to visually inspect the work for compliance with standards including separation distances, witness air pressure tests, gas main pressurizations, gas main connections, high-pressure service installations, restoration compaction tests performed on state roads, and any work conducted at night. So field inspectors, at least in case number 9653, were inspecting the actual work. The work in this case was listed to be proactive service replacements, ski bar service riser replacement, joint encapsulation, corrosion, and leak repair. So I'd like to know what's involved with each type of work. It would seem to me that the flow of gas needs to be stopped before the work begins and then turned back on before it's put into service. That's a basic assumption on my part, and I'd like to know who makes those decisions, who turns off the gas, who decides gas can be turned back on. For the record,
Your Honor, you're going to put this all.
it's
in a
all going to be
document?
in an order.
Okay,
Yep.
'cause I'm not taking notes quick enough.
But I
to-
want you to know what's coming.
Okay.
Commission's third question was, where is documentation of other inspection records for projects inspected by the terminated inspector or other evidence that other qualified individuals are authenticating the work with multiple layers of verification, as claimed by BGE? Again, another representation made by BGE that requires verification is that BGE's robust approach to contractor oversight incorporates multiple layers of verification and redundancy. So, need to see documentation of this robust approach, documentation of the protocols. The claim was made that this rigorous framework consistently exceeds industry best practices. I'd like to see documentation of industry best practices. And yes, I'll write that down too. The fourth question, that area of inquiry that the commission identified, was, why has BGE not mentioned its quality division or otherwise produced detailed audit checklists by this quality division for inspections that should have been performed by the terminated inspector to validate the workmanship of construction tasks? Those are some of the questions for BGE. Mr. Clementson, I had some questions for you based on staff's report. You had 3 meetings with BGE, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And were those meetings in person?
Yes.
Where did you meet?
The Spring Gardens facility.
I assume council was present, but did you speak directly with BGE personnel?
It was myself and BG&E personnel.
Or no, council was not present?
No.
Not naming any names, can you tell me the job titles or the levels of the people you met with?
No, Robert Rex.
Not naming names,
Oh, without naming names. Sorry.
sorry.
Didn't hear that part. Siren.
The types of people you met with, their roles, their job titles, or that's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay. I can get that.
Okay, did you meet with the people that you wanted to meet with?
Yes.
Did you have questions that those people couldn't answer?
No.
Mr. Spivak, you said that staff has recommenced discovery. Did the staff envision additional meetings with BGE personnel?
It may happen. Essentially, it is going to be in part dependent on what we see in your order, in part dependent on the responses we get from questions we ask. It may also depend on the questions we ask and what BGE wants to do in terms of responding to those. So it is possible, but not certain at this point.
Okay, so in staff's investigation report, staff recommended an independent audit of BGE's adherence to its inspection procedures / protocols. It seems to me that we first need to know what all of BGE's inspection procedures and protocols are, as well as industry's best practices, before we can perform an audit to see if BGE followed those procedures and protocols. So that's where I am. I will hear from the parties on the issue of a independent third-party person.
Thank you, Your Honor. So we did see the commission's order on that, discussing independent audit versus staff consultants. I would say that, the company's position right now is probably similar to where Your Honor is. We think right now, we kind of question whether a third party is even needed at this point in the proceeding. I think we could work with staff and the parties to meet and confer on additional information that staff would need to complete its investigation per the commission's directive here. Find out what they're asking for, make sure we can get it to them, or if we can't get it to them, why we can't get it to them. And then we could probably, depending on how that goes, report back to Your Honor on any progress that we've made. And if Your Honor concludes at that point that the process is going well enough, then there likely isn't need for a third party in our view. That being said, if Your Honor did conclude that a third party was needed for whatever reason, either deficiencies in the process of the parties meeting or for some other reason, our recommendation would be for the third party independent auditor. The reason for that is because at that point, staff and the company presumably would have met many times, tried to work things out, tried to get them what they needed. If that wasn't successful, I think at that point in time, the idea of a third party coming in with fresh eyes, no biases, no history with this particular matter might make some sense.
Sounds more like a mediator.
Well,
The way you say it, if you haven't been able to provide the information the staff needs and they still have questions, then bring someone in. That sounds like a mediator.
well, I think the commission's directive, Your Honor, says that the parties would meet and agree on processes and procedures that an auditor would follow, subject to the approval of Your Honor or the commission. So we would have that opportunity to define the scope of that engagement. And just for Your Honor and the party's information, that's very important, because if we end up going down that route, the scope of work is going to be very important for the procurement process for a third party. If we were going to put out an RFP, we need to know what the scope of work is. We need to know associated costs with that, because depending on the breadth of that scope of work and depending on the cost, that's going to dictate how long that process takes.
And hang on, I do have your letter of May 15, expressly reserving your right to seek recovery of the costs. And I'm not going to respond to this letter, and I don't want my lack of response to in any way be deemed an acquiescence to that those rights exist at all. Okay, this is all something to be dealt with at a later date.
Understood.
OPC.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess first I'd echo the point about on the letter of regarding recovery of third-party audit. I hope he has the same position as regards to, withholding the right, whether or not there exists a right to, seek recovery from ratepayers for the cost of a third-party audit. On the topic of a third-party audit, OPC agrees with the initial recommendation in the staff engineering report to obtain a third-party audit in this matter. These allegations are obviously a major concern, warranting this separate proceeding and a thorough investigation as ordered by the Commission. OPC's belief is that a third-party audit would help ensure that the allegations are fully investigated, and including, I guess we'd have to talk about the scope, but it may include potentially looking at BG's employee management practices as regards this inspector or other, if there's other issues in that sort of area. OPC's belief is that staff has a significant amount of other ongoing duties and responsibilities, and a third-party auditor would help ease the resource demands on staff and help ensure that bring in a new set of eyes to do a thorough investigation into this matter that is warranted. Thank you.
Mr. Banya?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to say a caveat is that we haven't been privy to the unredacted versions of the engineering report or any discovery that passed between the parties in case number 9645 after we moved to intervene and brought these issues to the attention of the parties. So with that caveat out of the way, we believe it would be productive to engage in some initial discovery, exchanging documents, as well as possible depositions or an evidentiary hearing, so that we could, in fact, get a proper scope of work for an independent auditor to come in after we nail down certain facts.
Mr. Spivak, I've heard that BGE takes the position that the reason that you don't have all the documentation that I've mentioned today is because you didn't ask for it. And you've heard Mr. Shu say that you have limited resources. I would like you to keep those two things in mind when you give me your opinion as to what staff needs most at this point.
Both of those things are true, Your Honor. And I think, yes, we can do further discovery and will. And we will certainly, look at your order with a view towards being responsive to the questions you have and the tasks you set in that order. Ultimately, as Mr. Shu said, we do not have the internal resources or wherewithal to conduct the sort of independent audit we're envisioning at this point. We just do not have the resources to have somebody spend days on end at BGE examining all of the records and documentation of things that may have occurred with respect to this inspection program. And for that matter, conceivably other inspection programs, because if there's a problem here, there could be problems elsewhere as well that we might stumble across or need to look at. So ultimately, I think we are still going to advocate for an independent audit, and I think we can agree with both BGE and OPC that we'll need to work with them in terms of developing the scope of that after further discovery has occurred and documents have been exchanged. So that seems to be, I think we all seem to be more or less on that page.
Well, I'll reiterate that I don't know how an auditor comes in and audits what we don't understand yet. You actually need someone to help you understand. I would suggest that what we need is outside counsel for staff to fully investigate and to review all the voluminous documentation that BG is going to provide. So I know that you hired outside counsel, for example, in the litigation that underlies or tangential to this. Did you issue any sort of RFP for that outside counsel?
For which matter, Your Honor?
Mr. Banya's lawsuit.
No, I don't know. I'm not
Okay.
involved in that
Did-
matter, so I don't.
What I am asking, I guess, is whether BG feels it can draft an RFP for outside counsel.
For staff?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do something like that. Obviously, we'd have to define the scope of that representation. But can I respond real quickly to what I heard after you asked what we would like to see, and then I heard what OPC had to say and Mr. Banya? Because I think this defining the scope of this is very important, and I think Your Honor had helpful language in Your Honor's decisions in denying our opposition to the petition to intervene. But when I hear stuff from OPC, like we got to look into HR practices and oversight, and when I hear Mr. Banya talking about depositions and we don't know what we don't know, I mean, the commission's order to staff was very specific. It said, quote, actions BG took to ensure that any gas infrastructure projects referenced by petitioners are in compliance with all applicable federal and state regulations, municipal codes, and internal safety standards. And so we believe this proceeding needs to be focused on BG's gas safety inspection program and whether or not the company violated any federal, state, local laws, regulations, or standards. This isn't a case, in our view, about HR practices, about hiring or promotion, about allegations of racial insensitivities or biases, frankly, anything that the former employees have been pursuing in their employment litigation. So I'm hopeful that Your Honor, when Your Honor issues the directive to us, could put some definitive guardrails on what this case is about and what it's not, because otherwise I'm very concerned that this discovery process is going to get out of hand and Your Honor's going to be seeing lots of objections from us and then motions to compel and responses, and I think that's going to waste everybody's time.
I don't think the discovery process is going to get out of hand, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to issue a notice of procedural schedule, and it's going to contain initial list of items, documentation that BGE is to produce, and questions that BGE is to answer. I have an initial date, but I'll hear from you of providing, and that's why I wanted to go over. I wasn't asking you to take notes, but the reason I went over my questions was that you would have an idea of how much I'm looking for, so you could give me an idea of when you could produce it. I threw in a date of June 10. So I need to, you can take some time to think about whether you can give me answers to all the questions I've identified here by June 10. I was hoping BG could submit a draft request for proposals for an independent legal consultant by May 28.
And just for clarification, Your Honor, when you say submit, are you talking about us working with the parties or actually making filings with Your Honor and the commission? This sort of thing.
Okay, so I did have you submit your response to the bench data request in the docket. That is not typical. All of the discovery responses are circulated amongst the parties, although the difference in this case is I would like to be copied,
Certainly.
because it's a different type of case, but no, not filed in the docket. When you submit the draft request for proposals, same thing, circulated amongst the parties with a copy to me. I would,
That was May 28th, you said?
yeah, these are my suggested dates. We can take a break and you can think about them. I was thinking that OPC and staff and former employees could submit comments on the draft RFP, if any, by June 4th, with an idea that the draft RFP could be finalized for issuance on or about June 11th. And then some of the comments on the draft RFP would include such things as when responses to the RFP would be due. But more importantly, would outline the scope of that legal consultant for staff. Then I have in here that staff can issue, in addition to everything I'm going to outline in the notice of procedural schedule, staff might look at my questions and see that there's additional information that's needed, and they can issue additional information requests as necessary during the RFP process. I thought it would be reasonable if BGE would respond to staff's first set of information requests within 7 business days.
Your Honor, just to be clear, are we talking about outside counsel that staff would be hiring and paying for?
So, within the confines of Order 91643, the consultant that was mentioned would be a legal consultant, outside counsel.
That's how Your Honor's, I didn't see the word legal in there. I thought
No,
it
you
was
might not have.
consultant.
I've listened to what everyone has said, and like I said, I think we need to understand what the inspection procedures and protocols are. And again, in the 60 days, that documentation wasn't provided to staff, and I think that we've also heard about staff's limited resources in reviewing all the documentation. Even if I've outlined everything that I'd like to see, they don't have the resources to review all of it in a short period of time. So I think outside counsel would help obtain the documents that are needed, because you said they didn't ask for them. So outside counsel would ask for them, have the time and resources to review them quickly, and we would move this along at a faster pace. If you disagree and think that my interpretation of the order prevents what I'm asking for, you're welcome to take whatever action.
Well, is this maybe a question of clarification, is this in addition to another consultant if Your Honor decides to go that direction? Because I don't believe we read the order to suggest that the company would be responsible for paying for staff's lawyers in advance of any decision about whether or not we need a third party to come in and perform an audit or a consultation.
But it's also your position that an audit isn't necessary, correct?
Our initial position is that we would like to work with the parties to see if an audit
Isn't it
is
your
necessary.
position that an audit isn't necessary?
Our initial position is until we have the opportunity to speak with the parties to see if we can get them what they need within the scope of this proceeding, then we do not need an auditor, or we don't need to make that decision yet.
I agree with that, and to help you reach that point, I think an outside legal counsel is appropriate.
All right, well, I don't
We can
believe we
disagree.
read the order that way, but Your Honor is the judge, so.
I don't
you decide.
read it as restricting me either.
All right, can we have a moment to confer?
Thank you, Your Honor, for your indulgence there. Mr. Michelle and I were just conferring, and you know, we would be willing to drop the position of let's wait and see. And, you know, we could go directly to the auditor, because if we're looking at a situation where we're hiring on behalf of staff outside counsel to conduct whatever they're going to do, and then we might have to turn around and do almost a duplicative process.
I don't
Through an
think
auditor.
it would be duplicative.
Well, you know, you're talking about bringing in an outside firm. They're going to ask a lot of the same kinds of questions. They might want to see a lot of the same kinds of documents, maybe more.
Why wouldn't the RFP be able to be drafted in such a way that outside legal counsel would be reviewing the documents you've produced?
Well, it certainly could be drafted in any particular way, but I don't. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I think what I'm saying here is, it sounded like Your Honor was concerned about our position that we don't think an auditor is needed, and then how would we come to that determination between the parties without staff having some additional assistance, because they don't have the resources to frankly come to that determination. And what we're saying now is we'd be willing to drop that position and just say, hey, you know what? We'll be happy to draft an RFP for a third-party auditor. They can get started as soon as necessary. And that way we're only dealing with one RFP, one outside consultant. Once, you know, I think that'll streamline things tremendously. We don't have to deal with two sets of outside parties.
I don't think it's two sets. I would envision outside counsel in conjunction with expert in the gas construction industry. So I don't think it would be two separate people, but also we still have the problem that I don't know how you write an RFP and get someone in to do something when staff hasn't fully obtained the knowledge of what the procedures and protocols that are to be audited are.
Yeah, but frankly, the parties really haven't had a chance to meet to see whether we can reach that point. I really don't think we should come to the conclusion that we can't do that.
I don't know that you can't. It's more of an issue of time.
Oh, understood. But I don't see any reason why we couldn't meet very quickly in the next
Well, you
week
had
or
60
so.
days and it didn't happen. So we can't waste another 60 plus days.
Well, I would quarrel with the characterization that we wasted 60 days. We met with staff diligently on every request. We got them everything they asked for. I am not aware of any allegations that we weren't forthcoming or that we didn't meet enough times or that we refused to meet, that sort of thing. So,
No, I heard that staff didn't ask for the documents that I've asked for. Mr. Spivak, you agreed with Mr. Shu that you don't have the resources to review all the documents.
To probably ultimately to review all the documents, but I was thinking more in terms of conducting the audits. But yes, we're very short on both legal and technical resources at the moment.
Is staff opposed to the outside consultant being a legal counsel, possibly in conjunction with an expert in the field of gas construction?
It's unusual to do that, to say the least. But we would not be opposed to that. In fact, I think we would welcome the assistance.
So
I'm still confused. I'm sorry, Your Honor. The gas construction consultant would be part of the legal
similar to, I think, OPC sometimes hires a consultant to assist in their review of stride cases. It's not unusual for a lawyer to work with a consultant.
Well, I remember the consultants OPC hired for Stride. They were individuals, and we did work with them on a number of data requests and that sort of thing. But I think Your Honor's talking about bringing in a whole firm in addition to a law firm, and then Your Honor's talking about after that process is done, then we're bringing in an auditor. I mean, that's,
I didn't get that far.
well, I'm very concerned about the time this is going to take, the complexity, the costs are going to be very high for this sort of thing.
And I don't
No.
want to spend time on an auditor and we don't spend those dollars wisely because we don't know what we're looking for.
Well, that's my earlier point, and perhaps I wasn't clear about it. I believe the parties can meet and confer and at least give Your Honor a proposed scope that the auditor RFP would contain. And we can debate or discuss whether that's sufficient or not. And I think we can do that without any third-party consultants coming in, based on the questions Your Honor has put together that are going to be included in your order, based upon subsequent conversations we can have with OPC, Mr. Banya, and staff, that we could come up with a set of parameters to present to Your Honor about what a third-party auditor would be looking for. And I think
Okay.
that's what the Commission's order envisions. It says the parties shall meet and confer to discuss parameters of an audit or a consultant subject to the Commission's or Your Honor's approval.
How about this? You can give me two alternative proposals. You can give me RFP language for what you think you'd like to see hired, and I'd also like an RFP for what I've described and what Mr. Spivak has indicated he would find helpful. And then you can meet and confer and talk about it, and I'll have an idea of whether the direction you'd like to head in will really get us where we want to go. In the meantime, I'm going to issue a notice of procedural schedule, which will have all these questions, will give you a better idea of who can possibly make sure that this information is obtained and reviewed, and whether the follow-up interviews / depositions are conducted appropriately. So back to the dates. Again, my notice of procedural schedule is going to list various areas of inquiry, documentation, names, personnel, things like that. And I'd like responses to all of that by June 10th. Staff may or may not issue additional information requests. OPC would review BGE's responses that they file by June 10th to all of my questions and any responses to any of staff's before issuing its own. Staff is not to issue, and Mr. Banya, the former employees are not to issue discovery. As I understand it, you don't need discovery. You have the information, so discovery wouldn't even be appropriate.
Well,
But
we would need discovery on.
No, sir. You indicated that. You stated that the former employees' collective experiences inside BGE have afforded them considerable institutional knowledge and invaluable insights regarding BGE's internal operations and practices, documentation requirements, and inspection protocols. Petitioners will make significant contributions to the Commission's investigation. The way that you are going to make significant contributions to the Commission's investigation is to assist OPC in any questions that OPC wants to ask after OPC has reviewed, and you have reviewed the answers that BGE provides to staff and to the Commission. That will be also in the notice of procedural schedule.
To clarify, Your Honor, so essentially, no discovery request from OPC until after June 10th.
Correct.
Is there the order will outline a timeline, a deadline, response time frame, correct?
BGE would respond then to any of your information requests within 7 days.
Okay.
I have that staff would provide a summary of the information and documentation gathered by July 9th. If OPC, with the assistance of the former employees, issues information requests, OPC shall provide a summary of the information and documentation gathered by July 23rd. All parties can comment on staff summary and OPC summary and the former employees summary of information gathered by July 30th in time for the initial report due to the commission on August 6th. That's what I had, but if you want to look at your calendars and think about those dates, I'm happy to take a recess.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we need to. Thank you, Your Honor.
We're off the record.
Okay.
Your Honor, I do note that I will, I know, I just wanted to let you know, I'm going to be out of the country from Monday, or this coming Sunday, the 25th, through, June 8th. Mr. Dean will be covering this case in my absence. I think we're done. But we're at least off the record, so let's stick around for a couple minutes. Yes. Would assume so and hope so. And even if the camera isn't off, the mic is off for any web broadcast. alternatives.
Well, yeah. I'm not ready to be horizontal permanently.
On the good news, so, I have finished renewing my PE with the exception of paying the fee.
Looking for a corner office?
I wasn't sure how much the engineers like me
Oh.
being up there before.
It's not one of their favorites, I give them that.
Yeah, well, on that precautionary thing, my father would say, getting older is not for sissies, but it beats the alternative.
Yes, it does. I think once she probably puts out her order, we will probably have a quick meeting with all the powers to be to make sure we're all square on dates and stuff like that, so
Mm-hmm.
there's no surprises.
There will be surprises.
Well, at least the ones we can hopefully roll out.
Yeah.
They have to get all that information too. That's a lot of work. I'm not sure what time frame we're down.
Well,
That's there.
I mean, and that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, and, it's going to be any assistance we can get, we need.
And in getting ready for all this, I think you should ask for the
Gee, thanks. Yeah, but the commission's orders, the August date, right?
Okay, we're back on the record? No, we're not. Now we're back on the record. Parties conferred, I guess, amongst themselves about the dates.
Yeah, I didn't have an opportunity to confer with the other parties, but we've talked about internally about. what
Yes,
we
yes,
do.
that's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and again, just to be clear, so your Honor's order would have definitive dates. We're not talking about you issuing an order and then we comment on the dates and you either keep the dates or change the dates.
Yeah,
That was
no, just to be clear, it's a notice of procedural schedule.
Yeah.
And it would have exact dates. It was that you would provide the responses to the questions I outlined today and provide all the documentation I requested as outlined today by June 10th.
Okay. So
Is that a good
that
date?
date is a little concerning for us because of a couple reasons. One, I heard a lot of items that are going to be in your Honor's report.
Yes.
And it's very difficult for me to sit here right now and know how long that's going to take us to get. But I think it's important for us to be able to get that, because I think whatever we get and bring to staff and the other parties is going to define and determine what the next steps are going to need to be in terms of consultants, auditors, et cetera. So I think right now, June 10th is only 20 days from now. So I would respectfully request an extra week. June 17th, maybe, I don't know what day that is, but, and then the other dates could be pushed back correspondingly about a week or so. And I know Your Honor issued a lot of dates, and I
Didn't
don't know
catch
if
them all?
I caught them all, but the idea would be not to prejudice anybody else, so we would push this back a week. And then
Okay,
everything else.
don't worry about that. I want to know about when you could submit your draft RFP. Both of them.
And again,
I had suggested May 28th.
yeah,
That's concerning as well.
that's a week. This is just the draft, like this isn't,
Right, so the other parties are going to comment on it.
yeah.
So, but now you've set yourself up to do two. So,
Right, and it's also, we have a holiday in between now and then.
just a day.
Well, holiday week.
How long do you need to give me two draft RFPs?
All right, we will work the hardest we can to meet that May 28th date.
Okay. What I can do is I'll switch the date for submitting comments to a number of days from the date you submit that, as opposed to a hard date.
Say that again, Your Honor?
Oh, I was giving the other parties a week to provide comments on the draft RFP.
Oh, okay, got it.
Is 1 week sufficient to provide comments on the draft RFPs?
It should be, Your Honor.
Yeah, should be fine, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and we'll look to finalize the draft RFP a week after the parties provide comments.
Are you envisioning those comments being filed into the record or?
No, circulated amongst the parties
circulated
with a copy to
amongst the
me.
parties? Okay.
I assume that was all of these deliverables. That was how we were going to.
Yes.
handle
Yes.
this. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Does that include the summaries of info gathered in the July dates?
Okay,
original?
so the discovery I had could be happening while this RFP review process is happening and while we're issuing the RFP and while we're getting responses to the RFP. There might be some discovery happening. The next date I had was staff would provide a summary of the information and documentation gathered. It was able to gather by July 9.
Is that, are you envisioning that to be coming from the consultants to be hired from the RFP or to be?
That would be
provided
pretty quick,
externally?
wouldn't it?
It
No,
would be.
I'm
That
envisioning-
that was my.
What I'm
take.
trying to do is have something in the report to the commission besides the results of the RFP.
If we have several weeks to review whatever information we get, we should be able to do that.
It's a summary.
Yeah, it's a summary, and it's basically with whatever information we have at this part. I mean, my understanding is that the report in August is an interim report to begin with. I mean,
Yes.
there's more is anticipated. So, and I think the same will be true of the information we gathered. I think that's going. The information gathering period is going to go on for a while in this proceeding.
Yes. Then the next date I had was if OPC issues, with the assistance of the former employees, information requests, then OPC would provide a summary of the information and documentation it gathered by July 23rd, 2025. Does that date work for OPC? To provide a summary, again, a summary of what information you were able to gather.
Yeah, that should be fine.
And then all parties would have a week, well, you'd have more time to respond or comment on staff's summary, and then a week to comment on OPC's summary. Those would be due by July 30th, so that I could put together the initial report due to the commission by August 6th.
A couple questions, Your Honor. I'm a little concerned about if we're going with whatever date Your Honor decides for us to get the initial slug of documents, and I'll call it, I'm a little concerned about discovery from the other parties during that period of time, which is going to be very difficult for us to deal with, as well as answering Your Honor's questions and the commission's, the questions the commission directed staff to ask us. In addition, I wasn't sure I heard number of days. Usually in these proceedings, it's 10 business days to respond to discovery requests.
I had 7 business days. Mr. Spivak, you indicated that you had recommenced discovery, but are you willing to wait till after you see BG's responses to the documentation requests I've laid out?
Yes, Your Honor. I mean, from what I've
Have you
what I've
served them
gathered-
yet?
No.
Okay.
From what I've gathered, from what you've said, I mean, you've asked a substantial series of questions that will have a lot of meat in the responses, and I think that will provide a basis for further discovery. It may not require as much depending on what we get, but and what I'm picturing in the summary that you've asked for July 9th is essentially a summary of the responses they provide in response to your order and whatever discovery we are able to conduct in the interim between now and then. And we would be willing to hold off until they do respond to your order, provided that, it's not too long.
Okay. Does that make you feel better? So staff's not going to issue any information requests to you until after you've responded to my documentation requests.
Understood. And what we had asked for that to be the case for all the parties in this matter.
Well, OPC is not going to issue any until they see responses to staffs.
Is that a directive?
Yeah, it's in here.
Okay.
Yes.
All
Or-
right. And
sorry, you're-
for the former employees as well?
The former employees are going to assist OPC
I
in
see.
drafting their requests.
Okay.
The former employees are not going to issue their own. They're going to assist OPC.
Understood. Thank you, Your Honor.
One clarification, actually two, I guess, Your Honor. So, or is my understanding that OPC could issue discovery after the response to Your Honor's questions?
It's mine and staff's.
So would,
And if staff will let you know, if you review BG's responses to mine and you, for whatever reason, say there's nothing else we're going to ask, you're going to let everybody know that
We will-
OBC can now issue theirs.
We'll let you know either that we have no additional questions for the time being, or we will provide copies of any additional questions we ask to you and the parties.
And that's information. I would envision there would be perhaps meetings with employees that you might like to have, and that's just, we're not talking about that yet. But when you submit your summary of the information and documentation gathered to date, you could put in there who you'd like to meet with or the number of people you'd like to meet with, so we have an idea of how many interviews / depositions need to be conducted after that point. Same with OPC. Does that make sense? So, given that they're not going to issue data requests to you, you're good with the June 10th date.
No, we were still asking for June 17th.
Why don't you see what you
It's very hard
can-
for me, Your Honor, to answer that question because I don't know. I haven't seen the list of questions. I heard Your Honor verbally go through them. It sounded like a lot.
Okay.
I'm concerned that I'm making a promise I can't keep, so I
Okay.
would respectfully request another week.
And I do note that if you give them the June 17th date, we would definitely want the 7 business day turnaround on discovery, because we'll, at that point.
if I may, Your Honor, I'm a little concerned about potentially having to wait until after staff asks DRs after the bench questions, right? Like, if the bench questions come down and response comes down on June 17th, and then staff asks questions, and then we, maybe staff needs a week to review or two to review the bench questions, then they, ask a question, and then there's another week. At that point, I'm not even sure how many days. We might have like pretty minimal time at OPC's
Okay.
part. I would just request that being able to ask the same questions at the same time as staff.
That's reasonable. We'll allow that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Everybody understand? I'm sorry if I confused it. But OPC, with the assistance of the former employees, will ask after they've reviewed BG's responses after June 17th.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Otherwise, yeah, responses are due in 7 days. Responses to information requests provided electronically to all parties. Served on all parties via email, not filed in the docket. Copy to me.
Oh, sorry, Your Honor. One more clarification. Would the summaries of information that be filed in the docket, or
That, yes.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Your Honor, do the intervening parties need to sign any kind of confidentiality agreement, or is that an issue that we should
So-
raise now? Staff and OPC are both bound by statutory requirements. That is not the case for the intervening parties.
Mr.
Yeah,
Hurst?
so we briefly talked about that, before Mr. Spivak arrived. I spoke with Mr. Banya and OPC's counsel. Mr. Spivak's correct. Staff and OPC wouldn't have to sign such agreement unless they brought on a consultant. I did explain to Mr. Banya that as an intervening party, he would have to sign a confidentiality agreement, and that we can provide one for review and hopefully execution, similar to what we provide in all these matters.
Okay,
Of
and
course,
hopefully-
any consultant brought in by staff at some point, if we go that route, would also have to sign something.
Yes, and hopefully I don't need to be involved in that.
I wouldn't see why you would, if we can all get to a mutually agreeable place, which I have all hope we can.
On an NDA, I think you can probably handle that.
I
Yes.
hope you're right.
But if, I'm here if you need me.
Okay.
Okay, I think that is everything we need to do today. Does anyone have anything else that they need addressed today?
No, Your Honor, that should do it.
Your Honor, I did have one thing. I didn't want to interrupt you earlier. You were discussing a concern that you had about how BGE would know whether or not an inspector actually visited a job site or did inspections. BGE does have tracking devices on all inspector vehicles.
Right, I read that.
Okay. I just wanted to
Okay.
clarify that. That's
Yeah, and any information like that, you're going to work with Mr. Shu and the other counsel at OPC to formulate questions when OPC is up. To the extent the questions haven't been asked, please don't duplicate. We're trying to move things along here.
Understood.
Okay, BG, anything else?
Nothing else, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're off the
Thank
record.
you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.